Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is my Des Moines-based colleague, Sarah Muller. We are at the Iowa State Fair, covering the first Saturday of the fair. So first, let's cheers. We have our fair lemonades right here, 10 out of 10. But first, I do want to break down the day. It was a big day for the 2024 election. What are some of your key takeaways? We saw a lot of candidates today and even yesterday.
Well, I mean, first of all, we obviously had the Fairside Chats hosted by Governor Kim Reynolds with a lot of our GOP candidates. We had the annual Des Moines Register soapbox, which is where they can kind of get up and give their stump speech. And then we had some people flipping pork at the pork producer's tent, which is kind of a classic. There's been a lot of stereotypical fair moments that we typically see every year. But this is a big year with a lot of candidates.
What were some of those themes that you saw in the speeches so far? You said they were giving their stump speeches, but what did that look like? What messages did you hear and that were resonating with the audience, probably most importantly?
I mean, obviously, we've heard a lot about China. China this, China that, China embedded with almost everything. You've got a lot of farmers here, and so a lot of people are worried about the agriculture side of China and some of the farmland issues that are going on there. Now, we also heard a lot about wokeism, woke concerns, stuff about LGBTQ issues as well as abortion. And then, obviously, we had our two Democrats who came, Marianne Williamson and Robert Kennedy Jr., who that was an interesting take because they're not taking the same approach as some of our GOP members. And I think RFK Jr. did a whole stump speech on pipeline issues that are impacting Iowans. So that was kind of a unique take.
And you were actually in the crowd during that speech. How did the crowd react? Did that resonate? Because I tried going into the crowd and I just waited at the gaggle because that was one of the biggest crowds at the soapbox that I've seen so far in my 2 days here.
Yeah, it was actually surprising. I happened to be holding up a microphone so we could get audio, and I was among the people who, a lot of them were more concerned about, hey, you know, he had called out his uncle at one point, and of course, people clapped for that. People clapped for some of his memories he shared when he was with his father when he was younger. And then people just wanted to kind of be in the Kennedy-esque moment. But the pipeline thing's interesting because it's something that doesn't get brought up a lot on a national scale about how much it impacts Iowa. And so that actually got really good reception once he had explained it all the way through.
And we were able, within the past day and a half, to really talk to voters. What were they saying to you? What was resonating with them?
Yeah, I mean, the voters, it was kind of interesting. We've seen so many Florida residents here today, which if you know anything about Iowa, we have a lot of snowbirds. And so there's a lot of people who have maybe a residence for the winter in Florida. So a lot of people were interested in seeing Ron DeSantis today. But overall, it seems like people are just really, they have somebody in the front of their mind, but they just want to hear what other candidates have to say. And I have to say, surprising amount of anti-Trump people in the mix. There was a couple of Trump-esque groups that were all wearing shirts and, you know, caps, but for the most part, some of the people I was talking to weren't fully sold on Trump this time around.
I have to say that too. The majority of people that I've talked to or have seen, they maybe were leaning towards one candidate, maybe wearing, you know, a hat, a t-shirt, but they were open to everyone else, or at least listening to everyone else. And I even saw some Trump supporters listening to Marianne Williamson's gaggle. So it really runs the gamut here. And what has surprised you the most over the last day?
Well, like one of the things that you'll see is the whole concept of like hugging and kissing babies and shaking hands and really getting that FaceTime. And when we're walking around, you know, I'm seeing Nikki Haley, and I got to say she didn't engage with the crowd that much. She was with Governor Reynolds. People were more excited to see Governor Reynolds, which she's very popular here. But at the same time, she was not really introducing herself and like getting in the mix with people as well as I thought she would. DeSantis was the same situation where he would stop for a couple of photos, but he would just essentially wave and walk by. It didn't feel like he was like really in the group. Whereas Vivek stopped at absolutely every single person. He had his baby strapped to him at one point, and he was shaking hands. He was asking people what they were interested in. He really was doing kind of the Jimmy Carter. And so that was really interesting to see how actually personable some of these people are.
I do want to piggyback off that because you and I were on the hunt for lunch and we were walking and we saw someone in a Nikki Haley shirt and we were like, wait, the person next to her is Nikki Haley.
Yeah.
And she was not engaging with anyone aside from her team. It was a different story once she got to the gaggle. She was taking photos with people. Same thing with Governor DeSantis. I tried shooting a question at him at the end while he was walking down. He was getting a few pictures here and there, but it wasn't anything like Vivek, who we saw engaging with the crowd. He pointed at someone and said, I recognize you from a different event. He was the most personable candidate I have seen so far in Iowa.
Yeah, off of that, a lot of our local politicians are hosting some of these people. So like Zach Nunn and his girls were with Vivek and his family this morning, and they just were so enjoyable to watch. They just seemed like they were having fun together, and like they got the kiddos in the fire truck, and it was what you should see from a candidate in this atmosphere. But like you said, and for those who have never been to the Iowa State Fair, we were walking to get a hot dog. We see Nikki Haley. I start running with Nikki Haley. Then I come across Ron DeSantis' people at the same intersection. I start running with Ron DeSantis. And then we run into a situation where we had to go down to the barns to be with another person. It is literally, you can run into anybody here. So, I mean, you throw a stone and you hit a candidate.
It's really crazy, and the takeaway that I have is that people are very open-minded here. They're not set on one candidate, so it's really time for these candidates to shine, show their message, show their personality, and hope that it sticks, because people aren't totally sold on one candidate. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think it's been interesting. I saw a guy wearing a Farmers for Trump hat this morning, and so I walked up to him and I said, I haven't seen that hat before. It was all green instead of red. And I said, I haven't seen that hat before. Where'd you get it? Are you supporting Trump? And he said, no. And I said, are you a farmer? And he said, no. He said, I just needed a hat for the day. And so I grabbed, these were being handed out for free. And then later on, I saw him and he had turned the hat inside out. And then I saw him a third time and he had just swapped out the hat for another free hat he had gotten. And so it's very clear that, like, just because you see people wearing things at the Iowa State Fair does not mean that they're getting handed so many promotional items. Actually, speaking of, Ryan Binkley, a very, very underdog person in this race. He is a pastor and a businessman from Texas. He has a hat that says WTF on it, and it stands for Way to Freedom, which is his slogan. But he's like, it was attention grabbing. It's getting some of the younger folks. And actually, his stump speech at the soapbox did extremely well for him, I think.
Going off of that point, when after Governor DeSantis was leaving his fair side chat, it was the most presidential thing I've ever seen. He was with his kids, his wife, holding them, and there was throngs of security and there were throngs of people. And I was standing next to this nice man. It was also hot. It is, you said, I think 78% humidity here today. It is hot. The sun is out. The sun is shining. But a nice man was fanning me with a DeSantis fan. And so I said, sir, first, thank you so much. But second, are you a DeSantis supporter? And he said, no, I'm open to him, but, I got to keep cool. And so, merch goes a long way here.
Yeah, they just keep on handing out free things and people grab them, because that is also another part of the state fair traditions, is you pick up as much free stuff as you can. But yeah, they know what's going to sell and they know what's going to, give away easy.
And thank you so much, Sarah Muller. Thank you so much for listening. We are back tomorrow at the fair. Thank you so much.